In the 1930s, Eliot Ness built a reputation as an incorruptible investigator, a detective whose career was defined by high-profile, highly public victories. He was the lawman who dismantled Al Capone's mafia empire in Chicago. Ness excelled at fighting organized crime because it followed a clear hierarchy with financial records and rational motives. When Ness was appointed Public Safety Director of Cleveland in 1935, he walked into a completely different environment. The Great Depression had decimated the local economy, leaving thousands starving and drifting through a heavily polluted industrial landscape. The epicenter of this despair was a muddy valley known as Kingsbury Run. It was a massive shanty town, a Hooverville, filled with transient workers and drifters living in makeshift shacks directly beneath the factory smoke. These citizens had no permanent addresses and no identification. If someone went missing, the authorities rarely noticed. This dense concentration of undocumented residents created a perfectly insulated hunting ground for a predator. In September 1935, two young boys walking through that valley discovered the remains of two men. The bodies were completely decapitated and heavily mutilated. When the local coroner examined the remains, he noted something highly specific. The killer had navigated the complex joints of the human skeleton without shattering bone, separating muscles with the clean, deliberate cuts of a trained medical professional. This was exactly the kind of threat Eliot Ness had no experience fighting. There was no financial motive, absolutely no witnesses, and no paper trail. The killer operated completely in the shadows, selecting random victims from the extreme margins of society. Ness's career relied on extracting evidence from structures and witnesses. Here he was facing a void, a killer who left no fingerprints and no one to testify. This chart compares the forensic capabilities of a modern police force with what investigators had in the 1930s. Today, DNA profiling and national databases make it nearly impossible to remain anonymous. Back then, blood typing was basic, and fingerprint files only existed for known local criminals. By explicitly targeting undocumented rail riders and removing the victims' heads, the killers severed the only reliable path to identification. Without knowing who the victim was, police couldn't trace their last known movements or connections. As the body count grew, the forensics revealed an escalating psychological profile. Autopsies on later victims showed they had been dead for weeks before they were discovered. The killer was actively preserving the bodies inside a hidden, refrigerated laboratory before deciding to dump them out. He was so confident in his evasion that in August 1938, he dropped two heavily mutilated bodies in a scrapyard located directly outside the window of Eliot Ness's personal office. The strategic use of anonymity effectively paralyzed the investigation. By selecting victims from the city's margins and removing their heads, the killer ensured the police never moved past the first step of identifying the body. As the murders reached double digits, the public pressure on Eliot Ness became overwhelming. The national press printed daily headlines mocking his inability to capture the Phantom Butcher, damaging his reputation. Driven to desperation, Ness authorized an extreme tactical maneuver. In the middle of the night, he ordered police to raid Kingsbury Run, evict hundreds of homeless residents, and burn the entire shantytown to the ground in order to destroy the killer's hunting environment. The raid accomplished nothing. The killer simply stopped dumping bodies in the valley, proving he didn't rely on the slums to operate. Meanwhile, the public turned on Ness, viewing him as an administrator attacking the city's most vulnerable citizens. The department's panic culminated in the arrest of Frank Dolezal, a local bricklayer who confessed after intense interrogation. But forensic checks of his apartment found zero evidence of a crime scene. Shortly after, Dolezal was found dead in his jail cell with 4 broken ribs, a death that heavily implied violent police coercion. Arresting a random laborer and burning down shacks showed exactly how lost the investigation had become. Force and aggressive raids yield no results when applied to an invisible threat. Ness eventually identified a target whose profile matched the forensic evidence. Dr. Francis E. Sweeney was a prominent surgeon and a World War I veteran. During the war, he had performed rapid field amputations in muddy, high-stress environments, the exact technical skills required for the torso murders. Ness quietly brought Sweeney into a secret room at the Cleveland Hotel. For 2 weeks, he had the country's top polygraph expert interrogate the doctor. Sweeney failed 4 consecutive lie detector tests, prompting the expert to conclude they had finally found the killer. But this is where the investigation hit an immovable legal wall. Dr. Sweeney was the first cousin of Congressman Martin L. Sweeney, one of Ness' most vocal political rivals. And in the 1930s, polygraph results were not admissible as evidence in a court of law. The police had no physical murder weapon, no fingerprints linking Sweeney to the bodies, and no legal confession. If Ness arrested the cousin of a powerful politician based solely on circumstantial theories, it would be dismissed as a political hit job. After hunting a ghost for years, Ness finally had his man in a room, but he couldn't touch him. The killer had cloaked himself in a shield of elite political privilege that the law couldn't penetrate. Sweeney voluntarily committed himself to a psychiatric hospital for his alcoholism. By placing himself under medical care, he moved beyond the reach of criminal prosecution, while the murders in Cleveland suddenly ceased. From the safety of the asylum, Sweeney engaged in years of psychological warfare. He continuously mailed mocking, cryptic postcards to Ness's home and office, reminding the famous detective of his failure. The weight of the unsolved case destroyed Eliot Ness. The man who brought down the Chicago Mafia ended his career in obscurity. He died broke at 54, haunted by his failure in Cleveland. We build our justice systems to fight logical crimes committed by visible people. But when a predator operates in the blind spots of extreme poverty and elite privilege, the system breaks, and the monsters win.